It starts with something small, a text you haven't replied to, a deadline that's creeping closer, a sink full of dishes that somehow feels like a personal failure. And then, without warning, everything hits at once. Your chest tightens, your mind races through a list of things you should be doing, should have done, should have never let pile up in the first place. You sit down on the edge of your bed and you can't move, not because you're lazy, not because you don't care, but because every single thing feels equally urgent and equally impossible. And here's what no one tells you about that moment. It didn't start today. It didn't start this week. That weight you're carrying, you've been holding it since you were a child. You just didn't have a name for it then. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to crumble under a normal workload while others juggle chaos without blinking? It's not about strength, it's not about discipline, it's about what your nervous system learned to expect before you were old enough to choose. Let's talk about that. When you were young, maybe 5, maybe 7, something shifted in your household. Maybe your parents argued behind closed doors they thought were thick enough. Maybe your mother cried quietly in the bathroom and you learned to listen for it. Maybe no one hit you, no one yelled, but no one saw you either. The lights were on, but emotionally, no one was home. And in that silence, you made a decision you were far too young to make. You decided that you would be the one to hold things together. You became the child who didn't cause problems, the one who cleaned up without being asked, the one who read the room before reading books. You learned that your job wasn't to be a child, it was to be useful, and you were good at it, frighteningly good. You learned which tone of voice meant danger. You learned that a slammed cabinet was a storm warning. You learned to shrink yourself into something so small, so quiet, so perfectly behaved that no one would ever have a reason to be upset with you, not because you were naturally compliant, but because you figured out, at an impossibly young age, that your emotional safety depended on managing everyone else's emotions first. It's like watering every plant in the garden except your own roots. You tended to everyone else's needs, pruning their thorns, feeding their soil until the gardener had nothing left, and no one noticed because the garden still looked beautiful from the outside. Psychologists call this parentification. It's when a child takes on the emotional or even practical responsibilities of a parent. In everyday life, this looks like a 9-year-old mediating their parents' arguments, or a teenager managing the household bills, or a little girl who learns to comfort her mother's sadness before she even understands her own. You became the anchor in a house that was drifting, and no one ever stopped to ask if the anchor was tired. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology found that parentified children develop a heightened sense of responsibility that persists well into adulthood. They don't just feel responsible for their own lives, they feel responsible for everyone's. The study showed that these individuals are significantly more prone to chronic stress, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion, not because they're weak, but because their baseline for normal was already carrying more than most adults do. And here's where it gets quiet and devastating. You didn't just learn to carry weight, you learned that putting it down was dangerous. That if you stopped holding everything together, the people you loved would fall apart. So you kept going. You kept going when you were exhausted. You kept going when your body begged you to rest. You kept going because somewhere deep inside, a child still believes that love is earned through usefulness. That belief followed you out of childhood. It lives in you now. Think about your life today. Think about how full your plate is and how guilty you feel when you try to remove something from it. You might be the person who says yes to every request at work, not because you want to, but because saying no feels like abandonment. You might be the friend who always checks in on others but panics when someone asks, "How are you really doing?" You might lie awake at night running through tomorrow's to-do list like a prayer, as though preparation can protect you from the chaos you grew up in. You might cancel plans last minute, not because you don't care, but because the thought of performing one more version of "I'm fine" feels physically impossible. You might sit in your car for 10 minutes after arriving somewhere, gathering the energy to exist in front of others. You might feel a strange numbness during moments that should feel happy: a birthday, a promotion, a compliment, because your body has been on high alert for so long that it doesn't know what safety actually feels like. You fill every hour because silence feels unsafe, because stillness sounds like something is about to go wrong, Because in the quiet, the feelings catch up, and those feelings are heavy. Look at your relationships. You're the one people lean on, the dependable one, the strong one, the one who always has it together. And that label feels like both an honor and a cage. Because the moment you crack, the moment you let someone see the mess underneath, you're terrified they'll leave, not because they're cruel, but because the child inside you still believes that love is a transaction that you must give in order to receive, that you are only worth what you carry. Now look at how you treat rest. You don't rest, you collapse. You push and push until your body forces you to stop. A migraine, a panic attack. A Sunday where you can't get out of bed and you call it laziness, when really it's your body screaming for mercy. And even then, even in the collapse, you feel guilty because resting feels like failing, because doing nothing feels like being nothing. This is what overwhelm actually is. It's not too many tasks. It's a nervous system that was trained in childhood to stay alert, stay needed, stay performing, and it never learned how to stop. Your body doesn't know the difference between a full inbox and a parent's unpredictable mood. It responds the same way: tight chest, racing thoughts, the desperate sense that you are falling behind on something. Even when you can't name what it is. Dr. Bessel Kolk, one of the world's leading trauma researchers, describes this in his work on how the body stores unresolved stress. He explains that trauma isn't just what happened to you, it's what your body remembers and keeps replaying. When you feel overwhelmed by a Tuesday afternoon, your nervous system isn't reacting to Tuesday. It's reacting to every moment in your childhood where things felt like they might collapse if you weren't vigilant. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, a state of constant scanning for threats. It was brilliant when you were young. It kept you safe. It helped you predict your parents' mood, dodge conflict, stay invisible when you needed to be. But now, as an adult, that same survival system is drowning you because you can't turn it off. You're scanning emails the way you once scanned facial expressions at the dinner table, and the exhaustion you feel. It isn't laziness, it is your body finally saying what your mind won't. I've been running for 20 years, and I need to stop. But here's the truth: most people miss the part that lives beneath the overwhelm, beneath the packed schedule and the constant doing. You're not just overwhelmed because you have too much to do. You're overwhelmed because rest feels like a betrayal. Somewhere in your story, you learned that your worth is measured by what you produce, what you fix, what you carry for others. And the moment you put something down, a voice whispers, "You're not doing enough, you're falling behind. They'll leave if you stop being useful." That voice doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the child who believed that love was conditional, that the only way to be safe was to be indispensable. A study from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals with high self-worth contingency, meaning their sense of value depends on external achievement, experience significantly higher levels of burnout and emotional depletion. They don't burn out because they work hard. They burn out because stopping feels like dying, because without the doing, they don't know who they are. And that is the quiet wound at the center of chronic overwhelm. It was never about the to-do list. It was about a child who was never told, "You are enough, even when you're still, even when you're not fixing anything, even when you're just existing." When was the last time you allowed yourself to simply exist without earning it? Carl Jung once wrote, "The foundation of all mental illness is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering." And before you flinch at that word suffering, sit with what he's really saying. He's not telling you to seek pain. He's saying that when we refuse to feel what we feel, when we bury it under busyness and productivity and other people's needs, the pain doesn't disappear, it calcifies. It becomes the tension in your shoulders, the fog in your mind, the unnamed heaviness you carry into every room. The overwhelm isn't the enemy, it's the messenger. It is your body trying to tell you something your mind has been outrunning for years. You are carrying things that were never yours to hold. Your mother's loneliness, your father's anger, the emotional temperature of every room you've ever walked into. These were never your responsibility. But you made them yours because no one else would. And maybe, just maybe, the most radical thing you can do isn't to organize your schedule better, or find a new productivity system, or push through one more week. Maybe the most radical thing you can do is to put something down, not because you've earned the rest, but because you deserve it, simply for being alive, simply for being the person who carried so much for so long with so little help. Healing from this doesn't look like a 5 step plan. It doesn't arrive all at once, wrapped in a bow. It starts quieter than that. It starts the moment you recognize the pattern, the moment you see that the child who held everything together is still running the show inside your adult body, and recognition alone is brave. Don't rush. Past that, most people go their entire lives without ever connecting their Tuesday afternoon meltdown to a childhood where they weren't allowed to have needs. The fact that you're here listening, making that connection, that's not small. That is the beginning. Healing begins when you let yourself feel the exhaustion instead of pushing past it. When you say no and sit with the guilt instead of rushing to fix it. When you allow someone to help you not because you've collapsed, but because you finally decided that you don't have to do this alone. It begins when you stop performing and start being, when you notice the urge to fill every silence with productivity and you choose, just once, to let the silence exist. When you realize that the people who love you truly love you aren't keeping score. They're not measuring your worth by your output. They never were. That scorecard only existed in the house you grew up in. Remember that moment on the edge of the bed when everything felt impossible? That wasn't weakness. That was your body telling the truth. That was every unspoken need, every swallowed emotion. Every year of carrying too much finally rising to the surface, and instead of pushing it back down, what if you just let it be there? What if you sat with it the way no one sat with you when you were small? You learned to hold the world together before you learned to tie your shoes, and you've been holding it ever since. Not because you wanted to, but because you believed with every fiber of your being that if you let go, everything would fall apart, including you. But here's what I need you to hear. You can put it down now, not all of it, not all at once, but you can start. One no, one evening with nothing on the list. One moment where you allow yourself to be held instead of doing the holding. You were never meant to carry all of this, and the fact that you did, that's not your burden, that's your proof. You survived. Now you get to live. Drop a comment below if any part of this resonated with you. What's one thing you've been carrying that was never yours to hold? I'd love to hear your story.